Hello, everybody. I hope you're well. Thank you very much for getting your assignments in on time. It really helps with my workflow. I'm trying really hard to make sure that you get feedback in a reasonable amount of time, and so your timely submissions really make that possible for me. So the purpose of this video is to model for you how I would actually solve this assignment. The purpose of this assignment was several things. First, it was to code language for the topic in red, and also code language for the discourse in blue, and identify functional moves of each turn as they relate to the purpose of the task. And the reason why we're doing all this is because these will set us up to think about language objectives. And the more that you can think about your activities in terms of these two domains, the more you will be in a better position to select language for your learners. And I've stated before that I think for each of you subject area teachers, it's pretty easy for you to think about the language of your topic. At the very least, it's the vocabulary of your topic, but I'm hoping through this course to kind of get you thinking a little bit more deeply about this at a phrasal perspective and a discourse perspective. A little more difficult is this language of the discourse, because that's the language that we use for the interaction in our classrooms when we do things like turn and talks. And language learners, if you want them to participate in the classroom, then they need more of this. Equally, if you're having your learners doing a lot of writing, then they have to link the ideas of their topic together into some kind of larger purpose, to write a lab report. And the way lab reports are structured, it doesn't matter necessarily what the topic of the lab report is. There's a particular structure, and there are specific patterns that repeat themselves across iterations of the same task. And so to help your learners discover what those common elements of all lab reports are, linguistically speaking, or in math as well. I mean, there are common routines that involve language, and helping your learners learn the language of the discourse of those routines is going to be a great support to them. Now, I also recognize that you don't have time to teach learners everything. In terms of a language objective, you can't have 15 different language objectives for a class of very diverse, linguistically diverse learners at different proficiency levels. However, once you become tuned to that, you are able to spot where a learner is having difficulty in communicating. You might be able to see where they might be able to improve to make their communication more dynamic or more insightful in the classroom, and that's tied to language. And so you can respond in the moment with language suggestions. Here, this might be a phrase to help you guys talk out a problem, or you might find you help a learner clarify what they're trying to say by modeling the response to a partner, and all of that involves language for the discourse. So, in order for us to understand the language for the discourse, and to some extent the language for the topic, we also have to have kind of a bird's eye view of the task. Because remember, the task, what you set the learners up to do, trickles down into to this language here. Okay, the task sets up the type of talk, the functional purposes of each of the lines of talk. All right. So when you write instructions and you think about what you want your learners to be doing, then you start developing a connection to the implications for language. So that's why we're considering all of this stuff here. Okay, so the title is Elephant's Toothpaste Lab Transcript, and the context is two students are discussing their results that they got after performing their experiment. So these are two important contextual things. We've got discussing results, and which is basically the purpose of the talk. All right, that's going to have some deep implications for discourse, after performing the experiment. So it's just really helpful to know that they are referring back to stuff in the experiment, which is language for the topic. Okay? They are very confused in trying to figure out what happened. Well, when you problem pose to students and you're asking learners to resolve ambiguities or resolve differences of results, they need the linguistic tools to interact to do that. All right? And that's the kind of thing that you might want to end up putting in an anchor chart if it's happening frequently enough in your classroom. Okay. The purpose of the experiment was to test the effect of changing the amount of one variable involved in the classic elephant's toothpaste experiment. I am excited at the idea that elephants brush their teeth in the first place, but there we are. Okay, so before I even start coding, I'm going to kind of tackle the easy stuff first. I just want you to keep in mind that this language for the topic and language for the discourse can be seen in some cases to operate on a continuum. All right, and so there might be some exemplars in our transcript that may be more of one than the other. It might be a little bit ambiguous. All right. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that we very often associate language for the topic in terms of technical language. However, what we also know from interaction is that learners, they shift style, or they shift register, and they start for purposes of interaction using basic language, okay, very common words, non-technical language, but they're still talking about the topic. And I think what we're trying to do for all learners, especially language learners acquire this basic language first because it's part of BICS, and we want to push them towards technical language. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this and I'm going to find the obvious technical language and code that in red first. And along the way, if I see some basic language referring to the language of the topic as well, I'll probably code that in red as well, because it is talking about the topic, but that might be basic words. But I just want us to recognize in advance that, if I was our content teacher, I'd want to be pushing that learner towards more technical language, not artificially so. I want to keep things authentic, but all right. So here we go. I think nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs, and also collocations make good targets for the language for the topic. And sometimes language functions do as well, like whole functional things, functional strings of language. But we'll just take it as it goes. So definitely, I think catalyst, catalyst was one. Overshadow is another one. H2O2 is another one. I think triplet and doublet, these are mathematical functions. So I would actually code those red. Somehow it goes faster. This is indeed describing a quality. All right. Tell you what, I'll put that one in orange. I'll say that's basic language, but it's something I wish we could say accelerate. There's technical language, increase in speed. There's other ways of saying that academically. All right, so this yellow, orange, or mustard colored, I'm going to count that as academic language too, but it's a little too Bixy. Okay, so expressions of time also are pretty obvious. Catalyst works quicker. Sure, why not? Quicker. We could find a more academic way of saying it. All right, original hypothesis, definitely. H2O2, I mean, in addition, add statements of rate, I think, could be considered functional language, or sorry, the language of the topic as well. All right. So that's pretty straightforward. Doubling and tripling. Okay, the same. Sure, why not? All right, so double it. And this is just iterative of the same stuff. This is a great little dialogue, by the way. All right. All right, 50 mils. Now, when we did only 50 mils, okay, so this is kind of where I'd be like, all right, that is talking about, some event of the topic, all right, but we could find a better verb for did. I mean, we want to move that learner off of basic language to something like when we measured, okay? So I would have a wish list for pushing them towards a more academic terminology of the topic and say measured, all right? Statements of time, sure, why not? Add enough catalyst, all right? I mean, I think that's the kind of thing we would say anyway, all right? So what you see is like, not only do I have nouns, but I also have like these little verb expressions, like a verb plus a direct object combination, okay? The catalyst stayed constant. That's a nice academic sounding phrase. Okay. Yeah, how much soap did we add? Yeah, I mean, that function is an academic function for sure. But I'll just save that for language of the discourse for now. We'll just put that one in as language for the topic. Phrases like half, single attempt, every attempt. Okay, approximately half, kind of like that. Accurate amount. We got the soap. We got the catalyst. All right. This is an expression of a relationship closer to the number of H2O2. Is there maybe a more academic way of saying that? I don't know, but I mean, he's referring to some kind of phenomenon here, and so in that respect, that reference to a phenomenon, it could be considered academic or language for the topic, but it's all done in kind of a Bixby kind of way. All right. What's the academic way of saying hits that quicker? All right. All right. So, I mean, I think we've got a pretty there's a steady supply of language for the topic. All right. I think it's important to remember that we want to help our learners talk not only about nouns, but also verbs and verb plus direct object combinations, okay? Because those are the things that, we're talking about. Verbs are operations, and there's some kind of operation on some kind of subject, and therefore we need to have a verb direct object combination, okay? And then we also have to have statements of manner as well. All right, because again, we're trying to describe phenomena, and phenomena are captured by verbs, and verbs these events have qualities to them. Okay, so we're attributing some kind of quality to the verb here. Works quicker. All right, quicker might not necessarily be the most academic way of saying it, but nonetheless, that's the kind of thing. All right, so when we think about language for the topic, it's technical language, and we are interested in nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs, and most importantly, I think it's important to get beyond the word analysis, and we'll call them clusters. Okay, these clusters of noun, like verb noun combinations, all right, and verb adverb combinations, and noun adjective combinations, or adjective noun combinations. All right. When you provide learners with these little groups, these collocations, then they're able to use each word properly in its appropriate context. All right. And that solves this basic language problem. When you give learners enough of these to make them sound like they're talking like scientists, then the basic language falls away. And I think as a follow-up, it's helpful to have learners, especially language learners, have conversion exercises, or actually they call them transformation exercises. This is where, for example, you provide the learner with some kind of phenomenon in basic language, and they have to provide a transformation of that concept in technical language. This is the kind of thing where you might have a matching exercise for low-level proficiency learners, where one side of the page is the basic language and they have to find the match to on the other side of the page. Or for higher proficiency learners, you simply have them write out the technical way of saying it, the academic way of saying it, and that could be a do now. It could be an exit ticket. It could be you just throw one example on the board and have everybody mull it over or shout it out, but just before they leave the class. Okay. Now, the other issue is this language for the for the discourse. And language for the discourse, why do we care about that? As I said before, it's the language of participation. And I mean, it's very easy to kind of look at all of this stuff and say, well, the rest of it must be language for the discussion. Or sorry, I'm jumping between terminology and classes. Language for the discourse. My intention today is to get a little bit more focused with this. All right. So in order for us to think about language for the discourse, it's really helpful for us to kind of pair up the function. All right. So I'm thinking, my goal is I want to help learners learn some sentence stems. All right. For talk. But they need to attach those sentence stems to some kind of discourse purpose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this line here, and I am going to determine overall what the purpose of this line is. All right, actually it's actually this line, first line, it's all in one. All right, and then I'm going to see if are there any kind of hot spots, any kind of focal areas that really help drive the function of the sentence. Maybe that's something I could teach in the form of a sentence stem, right? And that would supply my language for the discourse language objective if I felt like certain learners needed it. You would think that the catalyst would overshadow. Okay, so what's going on in this sentence? You could call it a statement of fact, but it's kind of not, because it's the you would think that. That's actually kind of tells me that there's actually something much more going on here. All right, this is a statement of hypothesis or some kind of supposition. All right, so what I would do is I would be like, oh, this introduces the language of supposing, all right, or hypothesizing in some way. It's not formal hypothesis, but it's interactional hypothesis. Okay, it's kind of like taking some kind of conceptual perspective position. All right, so you would think that, I think, is a great introducer of that's a sentence stem for introducing informal statement of hypothesis. Okay. So I can imagine a language for the discourse objective that is learners will attempt various ways of expressing doubt and hypothesis through a variety of structures. All right, and that might be one of them. All right, and obviously this one here is confirmation. Okay. It's no great revelation there. All right. This could also be considered speculation. I mean, there's lots of ways of kind of describing what's going on here. All right, but obviously the speaker has doubt and is positing an idea. All right. But it doesn't. So when we tripled it, somehow it goes faster. So there's actually a couple of little language functions going on here if we really want to be faithful to this analysis. All right. This little thing here is kind of there's it's a negation, not quite a refusal. The word escapes me at the moment. It's I'm sure I'll find a better linguistic way of saying it. Okay. All right. But here we have basically the start of a function that's going on here, and that is starting off of summarizing. Okay. All right. And this little phrase here is the start of a summarizing function in the discourse. All right. And another thing that goes on in this line here. So when we triple it and double it, somehow it goes faster. We also have basically this statement of cause and effect, right? That was kind of contingent on the first proposition. Right? And so when we X, Y happened. That's kind of that's the way we set up the grammar of the sentence is one of the ways we express cause and effect. All right. And a phrase like somehow, is a way of indicating that the speaker has lack of explanation. All right. Now I could go all day with this. I mean, I basically work on the premise that everything is meaningful in some kind of way. It's either a reflection of describing what's going on in the context, all right? This cause and effect, and the summarizing function, but also there is a bit of language function that is describing the perspective of the speaker at the same time. And so this word like somehow, and you would think that those are things that indicate that the speaker has doubt or lack of knowledge and is indexing that. Okay, and this is consistent with that don't make sense. Okay, and that's just a statement of speaker understanding. Okay. So there's in this single turn by Harry, there are a lot of things going on, right? There is a reference back to an idea that was posited before, and basically counterclaiming, right? And then there's a summarizing effect. This kind of happened. Then there's a somehow, which means there's a gap in knowledge. It's a flagging of, maybe we'll call it indicating gap in knowledge. It goes faster, right? And overall, these two parts of the sentence are a cause and effect, right? I'm going to try not to dive quite so deeply because I'd imagine I'll put you guys to sleep. But I just wanted to show you how deeply we can go. Here is we're going to take this little statement right there. That is, so we're going to say 50 seconds for this. This is basically a way of suggesting, okay? Suggesting whatever. So we're going to say 50 seconds for this, or maybe it's a statement of approximation, okay? And then here we have, how do the least amount of catalyst works quicker than what? Obviously, this is a fact-finding question. So what was your original hypothesis? This is also a fact-finding question. All right, but this is a fact-finding question about a speaker's idea, whereas this is a fact-finding question about the details of an actual phenomenon. And then obviously this person has an answer that the more H2O2 we add, the slower it would be. Okay, so here we have a little cause-effect statement. And then we have a statement of observation. All right, that this person is actually, this is a cause and effect. Maybe this is an inference, right? Whereas this is a statement of observation of data. Okay. All right, and then we've got phrases like, so you're saying, all right, that kind of go back to, this is kind of a form of a confirmation check. All right. And then we have the confirmation right here. And then a statement of contingency. So here was the confirmation. And then here's a statement of, cause and effect going on. All right, here's a statement right here of lack of understanding, but it's a particular kind of lack of understanding. It's not like I have no idea what's going on. It's lack of understanding of the things they're observing. Okay, all right. And the long and short is that learners need phrases like that doesn't make sense, and so you're saying, okay? This so you're saying has an important role to play because it's interactional. This is Harry, who is basically saying, Jaden, I hear what you're saying. I recognize you as another speaker in my interaction, and I'm repeating back to you what I've heard. Okay, so in a way, it's kind of got this validating effect to the previous speaker, and it's taking the ideas of that previous speaker and extending them or expanding. And that's a complicated interactional thing to do, especially if you don't have the language. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to be able to teach all of your learners this kind of thing, okay? But when learners don't have this, you will find that they just can't participate to the same level. And here, I would say there's a lot of good learning going on out of this interaction. Okay, this is what we call negotiation of meaning. This is big time negotiation of meaning. All right, which is awesome. And that negotiation of meaning is partly about, first of all, characterizing the phenomenon, but then also labeling the phenomenon. And they might be able to figure out the characterization of the phenomenon with maybe basic language. And you might want to walk along and go, great, yeah, you have identified exactly what's going on. Here's a better way of saying it. Okay, and then you provide them in the moment when it's relevant with the better way of saying it. Okay, so the teacher might have a way of coming in and incidentally relabeling basic language in the interaction when it is relevant, i.e. in the moment. Okay, so you have to be opportunistic for this. All right, and what I would tell you is whenever you do that and you actually tell a learner a better way of saying it, you tell that learner right then and there, write what I just said down. Right? Have them mark it on their worksheet. Have them mark it in their language notebook for their subject area. Okay, because you want to draw attention to the language of expressing these academic ideas. Okay. All right. Now I could carry on, but I think this video has gone on for long enough. I hope this helps you understand the process a little bit more. Identifying language of the topic, awesome, but also seeing the value for language in the discourse and understanding that that language for the discourse is connected to the purpose of the task. Okay, things like statement of hypothesis and confirmation and negation, or we'll call that rejection of a hypothesis. All right, and then there's summarizing of events. Okay, and then there's interactional stuff or reflective of man versus process. I don't understand that. Okay, we call that speaker stance. Okay, this is a stance statement. Okay, so it's not just a description of the event, it's a description of the speaker's stance. All right. Anyway, I hope this helps. I would love to know what you think. I know a lot of you are not used to thinking about language this way, but when I am watching transcripts or listening to transcripts of classrooms, you know, this is the kind of stuff that I'm paying attention to. And when I think about learners having difficulty participating in activities, you know, like things like turn and talk, I want to know what I can provide them with so that they can participate. And you know, honestly, in practical terms, you know, you may only choose one of these things, all right? But maybe what you do is you have an anchor chart up on the wall that has a bunch of this stuff that's categorized by function, okay? So that learners can kind of reference it. Like, you know, you go and point to the wall and say, guys, you're going to be getting into a turn and talk. Check up on the wall, just as a brief refresher, on things for different ways of summarizing or different ways of hypothesizing and such. Okay? Looking forward to your comments on this.